Microsoft Excel's Vlookup function is perhaps one of the most common, one of the most popular, more advanced type functions. But it has some limitations. A VLOOKUP, let's talk about it for just a moment. It's a vertical lookup. And what it essentially does is it takes a value, such as an ID, like what I have on the screen right here, employee ID number 1054, takes that value and then goes into a list, such as this master employee list here. It looks through the first column of the list, and it looks vertically through that list. Now think about this for a moment. What if your master list, like the one that we're looking at here, its first column was not the employee ID? Maybe it was the department or last name or first name, or some other column was the first column in the list. Employee ID was maybe 3, 4, it was someplace in the middle of the list. Well, a vertical lookup wouldn't be effective in that situation. You'd have to redesign your list essentially by moving the employee ID to the first column within the lists. And that's perhaps not something that we can do or something that you want to do within your lists. Something else about the VLOOKUP. Once again, it's a great feature. Very, very popular. Very, very common. But it's also very resource intensive. If you've got a lot of VLOOKUPs happening within your workbook or HLOOKUPs, your workbook's going to tend to slow down when it calculates the data. You got hundreds of rows in there with hundreds of VLOOKUPs. You open up the workbook, you might be sitting there for a little while waiting for it to update its calculation. Well, in steps, two functions that I want to discuss here. These two functions used together, they're called index and match, are going to remove these inadequacies that the VLOOKUP has. You don't have to worry about the lookup value being in the first column of your lists. You can look in either direction, left or right, for your returning value. And they're tended to be more efficient for your system. Okay? So let's take a look at how you use the index and match function. And I want to talk about using them independently first, just so we get an understanding of what index and match is. And then we'll take a look at using them together. So take a look. I'm here inside the example file once again. I'm on the VLOOKUP worksheet. And here I've got my index and match column and the index and match single column. So first we're going to talk about using them independently, and then we'll talk about nesting these functions together to simulate the idea of a VLOOKUP. So watch this. Here's first the index. So an index function, essentially your Excel document's a big index. It's a big grid. You know, if we look at this data over here, like last names, it's just a column of rows, right? A column of values here in row format. And if we think of this as an index, we've got row number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, and so on. If I grab multiple columns here, maybe I've got last name and first name, and I want to find Mark. I want to know what position Mark, here it is right here, what position Mark is in this index, this group of data. Well, it's in the second column, and it's in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th row. So second column, 7th row within this index, this collection of data. Okay? So watch this. Here's the index function. I'll jump up here into G3, and I'm going to create the index. I'll hop up to my Formulas tab. I'm going to go into Lookup and Reference, and let's find the one called Index. Now, this is going to be a bit different than what you perhaps experience with other Microsoft Excel functions. There are two different flavors of working with this function. I'm going to go ahead and stick with the common one, just the first one there, array. You know, what's your collection of data? What row number or column number are you looking for within this array? So I'll go ahead and hit OK. All right, so it wants to know 3 things. I'm really only going to take advantage of 2 of them. Array and row num are both bold, signifying that these are required arguments that this function needs. Column num, not bold, so it's optional. But if you did have multiple columns, such as last name, first name, and department selected, well, which column do you want to get out of this? So my array, let's say as an example, I just want to look for first names. So my array, I'm going to grab the first name column here. I'm just grabbing from C2 to C18. And let's see, I want to know what's inside of the 7th row. So I'll tap my 7 and hit my tab key here, and I'll hit OK. And there's Mark. So it's just a big index. It's a big collection of data. They're calling it an array, an indexed array. In position 1 of this particular array, first names, we got first name. In the second index, we got Howard. In the third index, we got Joe, so on and so on. 7th index, we got Mark. So this is our index function, and it returns data back to us based on a position. All right, so keep that in your mind. Let's try a match. I'm going to hop over to the match column, and once again, back up to formulas, back into lookup and reference, and let's find the match function. All right, now, whereas the index function, we gave it a numeric value, such as 7, and it returned to us a value in the 7th position of that index of that array. Now, here's what the match does. First thing, wants to know, hey, well, what am I looking up? What am I going to look for? Well, let's look for one of the employee IDs this time. So I'm just going to grab this 1075 value. All right. Now it wants to know the second thing. Well, where am I going to look for that? Where am I going to find it at? Well, you're going to find it inside this column over here. I'm going to grab this array, this collection of data, A2 to A18. Now, I am going to take advantage of the third option here. If you're familiar with the VLOOKUP, this might sound familiar to you as well. It's a number, 1, 0, or -1, indicating which value to return. Now, you can actually put some other values in there as well. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to type in true. I'll hit true here, and what this is going to do is it's going to find the exact match, very similar to that VLOOKUP that we spoke about earlier. So I'm going to put true in there. We'll find the exact match. I don't want the closest thing to it. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now remember, the index returned a value back to us based on a position. This time, it returns the position of the data back to us. So hey, I told it to find 1075, right? That's in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th position. So now with match, we can find a piece of data by its position. With index, we can find a value based on its position. All right, so those are two separate ones. Now, FYI, you probably won't use these independently of each other. More likely than not, the magic really comes into play when you nest them, when you bring them together, index and match. Let's take a look. Let's try this together. Inside of my I column, I'm going to go into I3, and I'm going to use the index and match function to simulate the same kind of concept that a VLOOKUP does, but a much more robust, a much more efficient method to performing a lookup. All right. So my first step here is I'm going to actually use the index function. So I'm going to go up to my formulas tab again, back to lookup and reference, and I'll find index. All right, once again, I'll pick the array flavor. I'll hit OK. All right, remember, we want to know 3 things here from us. So first thing, well, where am I going to be looking for data? Well, I guess first off, what is it that we're looking for? Well, let's say, you know what, I want to look for last names. Okay? Well, I've got a list of last names right here, but I've also got a list of last names on this master employee list. So let's actually hop over to master employee list, and I'm going to grab the last name column here. I'm just going to click up in the B1, and I'll do Control-Shift down arrow, grab all of that. There's the array. All right. Now, I'm looking for a specific last name. Now, we know that utilizing the index function, I could give it a numeric value. I could say, hey, return what's back inside the 10th column or 10th row, or the 5th row, or the 1st row. But you know what? I don't want to just give it a numeric value and say, well, just return whatever you find in that position. I'm looking for a very specific last name. Well, the last name that I'm looking for is going to be based off of an ID. All right. So now in order for us to be able to determine where the ID is at so that it gives me back the appropriate last name, I'm now going to nest a match function. So inside of my row num, rather than just some number I'm throwing out there, I'm going to nest the match function to find the appropriate employee ID's position inside the master employee list. So now inside my row num, I'm going to bring in match, open up a parentheses. Now to make this a little bit cleaner, I'm going to click up here in my formula bar inside the match section. And this will take me into the match arguments. All right, so what am I looking for? Let's see, I'm going to find employee number 1067's name. Let's grab that. Well, the lookup array, where's it going to find this at? Well, for me, I'm going to go back to master employee lists. It's going to find the IDs inside the A column. So I'll go to A1, Control Shift down arrow. Let's grab all of that. And I'm going to tell it, let's do true here. Let's find the exact match. All right. So now I'm finding where that employee ID is within that other list. Told it what to look for, where it's going to find it at. All right. Now this is just the match function. Let's go back to index. I'm going to click back up here into index. And let's see, am I feeling good about this? We're finding the array of all the names, all the last names, and we're going to use the row num match function to be able to find that position. All right. Now let's see. I'm thinking here. We've got the column. We've got the master employee list there. I think I'm feeling good about this. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Scoot. Is that right? 1067 for Scott. How do you pronounce that? Inside the last name. That looks right to me. I'm going to hop over to my master employee list. Let's look at this. Let's see, 1067, there it is. It's inside of the fourth row, and it was able to find Scott based off of this index and match combination. Very similar to the vertical lookup once again, but the column that it's looking through doesn't have to be the first column. Employee ID could be in any of the columns here, right? But based on position within this set of data, we can easily and effectively find this data. So try this out. Try it out a few times. Really get a grasp for this. Look for a few different last names or try different things. Look for last names. Look for pay rates. Look for department, whatever it might be, based off of employee ID or whatever you want to look for. Try this out.